From Public Radio International, this is The World. A co-production of the BBC World Service, PRI, and WGBH Boston. It's Tuesday, June 15th. I'm Marco Werman. President Obama speaks to the nation tonight about the oil disaster in the Gulf. It's the next step in a White House campaign to show how seriously the president takes the crisis.
We've seen the White House characterize this as similar to 9/11 and how much it has rattled the nation and the implications because of it.
Also today, the British government apologizes for Bloody Sunday 38 years later.
On behalf of the government, indeed on behalf of our country, I am deeply sorry.
Now this news.
BBC News with David Austin. An inquiry into the events known as Bloody Sunday, when 13 civilians were shot dead by British soldiers in Northern Ireland in 1972, has found that what happened was unjustified and unjustifiable. The British Prime Minister David Cameron told Parliament none of those who died in Londonderry had been armed or were posing a threat to the soldiers. He apologised on behalf of the government and the country, saying the soldiers had given no warning and later lied about what had happened. But Mr Cameron hoped the inquiry's findings would also help the process of reconciliation.
Bloody Sunday was a tragedy for the bereaved and the wounded, and a catastrophe for the people of Northern Ireland. Those are words we cannot and must not ignore. But I hope what this report can also do is mark the moment when we come together in this House and in the communities we represent, come together to acknowledge our shared history, even where it divides us, and come together to close this painful chapter on Northern Ireland's troubled past.
Bloody Sunday was a defining event of the 3 decades of conflict in Northern Ireland. In the city where the shooting took place, Derry, a large crowd gathered to hear the report's findings. Many were relatives of those who were killed. Among them was Tony Doherty, the son of Paddy Doherty, who was shot at the age of 31.
Unjustified and unjustifiable. Those were the words we've been waiting to hear since the 30th of January 1972. And I think, Derry, you have been absolutely brilliant in this. The victims of Bloody Sunday have been vindicated and the parachute regiment has been disgraced. Their medals of honour have to be removed.
The former British Army Chief, General Sir Richard Dannett, said the inquiry shouldn't be seen as a condemnation of the Army's conduct in Northern Ireland as a whole.
Many tens, hundreds of thousands of soldiers took part in that 38-year campaign in Northern Ireland. 651 of them lost their lives. I think 6,307 were wounded. So the actions of a small number are reprehensible, but they're not the actions that represent the whole army.
General Sir Richard Dannett. In other news, the United Nations Refugee Agency says it believes more than 250,000 people have now fled fierce ethnic violence in southern Kyrgyzstan. It's launching an emergency airlift of supplies to try to help ease the crisis. The UN's representative in the Kyrgyz capital, Bishkek, said that he was particularly concerned about the situation in Osh, which has seen the worst of the violence.
This is a major urban center. It's the second largest city in Kyrgyzstan, and it clearly is facing a situation in which food, energy, water are in critical supply, and we just need to get help.
This is the World News from the BBC in London. Congressmen in the United States have accused major oil companies of being no better prepared than BP to prevent environmental disasters. They'd called oil executives to testify on Capitol Hill and expressed frustration at BP's failure to prevent oil leaking from its stricken rig in the Gulf of Mexico. From Washington, here's Paul Adams.
After 2 months of unrelentingly bad news, America's oil boss